Okay, welcome to chapter 10. Alicia is leading today, so I'll hand it over to Alicia.
Thanks, Mila, and thanks everybody who's here or watching later. Welcome. So chapter 10, The Living Temple. Personally, I got stuck just on the title for a long while. I was like, oh, wow, that's a lot. So the overview is basically, this chapter is just with Aphraar and Omra. And Aphraar is eagerly waiting to cross the gulf to the next stage of his progression. But he realizes with Omra's explanation and encouragement and patience that actually I still have a lot of influences from the earth to let go of. And there's a mission that I have to carry out before I'm crossing the gulf. So this chapter is about that, and Omra explaining some of the stages of free will for us from on earth into the spirit world and forward from there, and about the actual living temple, the edifice of the living temple and all of the souls that make up for it. So anyway, so the first question or the first part of it is basically about, without quoting it exactly, is about how you feel about just that title and what it brings up for you, and how it conjures up who God is and how God's created everything. And maybe it creates something that you're aware of in your personal life or in your environment or in just life in general. So, anyone want to start? Well, I can start if you like. Well, I'll just tell you the biggest thing that, I mean, lots of things came to me, but the biggest thing was that God is actually a living temple, like the ultimate living temple. I felt like I'm within, and we're all within that living temple. And it's very safe, it's secure, it's a sanctuary, it's very pure, and it's very expansive and freeing at the same time. So, and there are many more things that came to me apart from that, but that was like the main thing. And then seeing our souls as a living temple, and that soul is living through the living temple of the spirit body and the physical body, and all the components that are made up of those particular bodies, even down to a cell. It's like a whole little universe just in the cell. And then I saw a tree and all the living things that incorporate a tree, etc. So in the book, it's speaking, of course, we're right now in the court of voices, or the mount as he refers to. Those also felt like living temples, but they all had the feeling of being alive and having a continuation about them, that they're organic, that they're not static. So that felt quite important to me as a part of it living, it's continuing, thriving. So anybody else have anything come up, or it didn't really ring bells for you? As we say here in Mexico, Lisa, nada, nada, nada. Michael.
It struck me that God is majestic. I had not considered creation. I think of creation as a universe that everything is slewn out across the universe, kind of like one plane, whatever, you know. But here it's a temple. It's something. There's some plan or some greater vision, some greater image that it fulfills. So I thought God is majestic, and that all creation is the living temple.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's good. So Virginia.
Living temple to me, first thing I thought about is that it's ever changing.
Yeah.
But then when you think of it as God being a living temple, then I'm thinking, does God change all the time as well?
Well, isn't God forever expanding and growing as well?
Okay, yeah, always expanding and growing. Okay.
Possible for us to know everything.
Yeah, no, that's just the thoughts that I had about what that could actually mean, and it seems bigger than what I could really put down
Yeah,
in words. Yeah.
definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to share? Mila?
Having grown up in temple, temple being a core part of the Eastern communities,
Yeah.
I feel when I think of temple, I think of the dynamics that happen among congregation, among people. So when I was thinking about the living temple, I was thinking about what it's, so for example, the conversation Aphraar is having with Omra, it's like there's something going on in the conversation that allows for you to change in some way. So I see temple as something that's outside, like something that happened outside of you, but it allows for the relationships. It's about the relationships and the changes that can happen inside of you while being in that experience. That's what the living temple brought out for me. It could be anywhere where you come together with each other and we create an environment in which you can have kind of soulful connections.
Yeah, like a community. The temple is like a community. Yeah, lovely. Anyone else like to share? Or we'll move on. So the next bit that I pointed out, I mean, as you can imagine, for all of us, we have so many things that spark our attention, but this little line stood up for me. Never before had I felt such an all-consuming desire as I had to reach that gate, which stood so far and yet so far away. So I wondered what sort of experiences you yourself have had of all-consuming desire for something or someone. And how does that Aphraar's desire inspire you personally? So Lisa.
Yeah, for me, right away, it conjured up the feeling of what I perceive as longing for my soulmate, which feels so near at times and yet so far from me, so unreachable. And I have a lot of hopelessness about it, but at the same time, I'll come through some emotions and then I feel him more closely when I come through those, like as if he's in the room right next to me. And I'd like to say that it's that sort of pure desire that Aphraar has, but I know that it's also tainted with a lot of my addictions and neediness, and I lost my dad young, and being that my soulmate's male, so that whole thing I've been tangling out. But often it's when I grieve some of the emotions related specifically to losing my dad, then I feel my soulmate right there in the room next to me. So for me, that's what it immediately brought up when you asked that question.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing, Lisa. So I'm not sure who was first. Let's go with Judith.
Hi. When I first read this question, I kind of felt like, I feel like I don't have a lot of desire. I feel like I kind of go into a depression a lot, which is a lack of desire. So the question kind of helped me really think about, when was there a time when I really did have a desire? And I really did. I moved to California by myself when I was 21, and that was a very pure desire. I really wanted to do it. And in comparing myself with Aphraar, I kind of feel like it has a lot to do with faith. When I was young and I made this move, I kind of had faith that everything would be okay. And the reality is, I've always had a home. I was never homeless, but I also had a lot of fear and nervousness around meeting other people and being in unknown situations. And I think that was because I didn't have faith that I could succeed in those areas. But the faith that I had, I could succeed in simply getting a home, really made the difference. And I think with Aphraar, I guess when you become so grown in love and evolve, you have nothing but desire. And there really is very little fear. He still has some fear and anxiety, but he seems to have resources right there that help him with that.
Yeah.
So it makes it hopeful for me, like no matter how fearful I get, there's always going to be a resource out there if I want it. So that's the beauty of that question and that part of the book for me.
Yeah, and that's inspiring to me, to even though you maybe had fears, as we all do about things, but you had enough faith to go anyway.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's great. Lovely. Thank you. Michaela.
For me, it was a similar experience to Lisa's, in that it just sort of made me think of the longing that I've had for my soulmate, and I feel like it kind of drew him in, and now he's here. We've just become enmeshed, and it's really painful, and so it makes me really question the genuine nature of the longing. And in terms of what Judith was just saying with Aphraar, like I can see it. I hadn't really made that connection with faith, but I agree with that. And I can see, for me at the moment, my faith isn't enough, and I just want to run a mile, rather than stay in it and keep connecting to my pain and working through my own experience. I just want to run away. So that's where Aphraar's really inspiring. And I guess you get to that point where your desire is so strong that whatever comes your way, you're prepared to engage with and take responsibility for.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Thank you, Michaela. Anyone else like to share? Okay. So let me see what I had. I had that soulmate part too. But first of all, I actually was remembering times with certain people who I felt attracted to and longed for, and they didn't seem interested, and then finally they were. But I also realized that most of those in the past were definitely more than tainted with addiction, definitely with addiction. So yeah, I can see that. But there's this, I can see also in some perhaps aspects of work that I've had a vision about or been inspired to take forward, and part of it's unfolded, but not the rest. And it's like you said, Judith, about having faith, just take one step and realize that actually it's not that it's the wrong step, it's that you have a lot more purifying to do along the way. That's how it felt for me. So let us move on. So on this second part, I've put, I just mentioned that Aphraar emphasizes the impregnable nature of the bulwarks of the kingdom. And at that moment, Aphraar has a memory of standing on the mount with Uniqueness, watching a woman unable to travel invisibly inaccessible roads. And he compares this with his present inability to cross the gulf. So Omra then says in paragraph 2 on page 83, be very careful not to try and carry the illustration beyond the particularly obvious point of resemblance. And it continues, the failure to observe this necessary rule is one of the great sources of ignorance and error. And he also continues, both of you are unable to pass by a chosen route to a goal you desire to reach. So far, the two cases are parallel, but directly you ask why you're each unable to proceed. You find that you are divided as far as night and day. She, because of misdeeds for which she must first atone. You, because being found worthy, you have taken your stand in readiness, but your eager soul has been called upon to perform a preliminary duty before crossing. So certain aspects of life obviously encourage us to compare ourselves and situations with others. Omra seems to be commending Aphraar as to how far he's come in his progression, and to realize how each person and circumstance is unique as far as a comparison is concerned. So the questions are, how have comparisons affected your own view of God, of yourself, and of others? How can the awareness of your uniqueness help develop relationships with yourself and others? And do you have examples of waiting, as Aphraar did, unsure of whether you're called to stand still or to go forward and take an action? So would anybody like to dive in? Judith.
I'm first, okay. I actually think this is probably my worst problem, is that I compare myself constantly to others.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people do, and I think our society probably is set up to do that, where we're always judging each other by our careers and our looks and all that. And I guess I feel kind of more upset. And instead of working on the issue, like Michaela said, I run away. And so by kind of reading these books and seeing about what Aphraar does in the relationship to God, it kind of gives me quite a bit more hope that I am unique. And I was just also feeling like, what if I actually crossed that bridge and actually 100% knew in my soul that I was unique? What would that open up? I mean, would it be like peeling off that onion, and what would I find underneath, or what we find underneath when we truly know that? You know, how would our world change?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what I got out of it. And the rest of the questions, I didn't really have an answer for.
Mm-hmm.
But the uniqueness also helps me realize that I'm actually, when I meet people like you guys and others, I'm really not as different than anybody else. Even though someone might have a very different problem and it doesn't bother me, we still struggle with the same problem, and we still are basically on the same boat. So that's how I feel about it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Judith. Selena.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I find I go down that slippery slope of comparison sometimes, and comparing your progress with others. You know, others seem to just have an emotion and their life just turns around. And with me, it seems to take like 5 years. That's what it seems like. Now, I don't know if that's what's really happened with them, but it gets really easy to start doing that, I find, comparing. And if I think recognition of uniqueness helps you not to do that, because then you can kind of stay out of judgment. You know, like you really haven't walked in another person's shoes. You really haven't. So you really can't fully assess what their journey is anyway. So, and I think when you have your own unique journey, then you have something to share that's authentic, rather than trying to compare journeys, right? Trying to make too many alignments. Yeah. Anyway, that's something I have trouble with. Yeah.
That's great, Selena. Thank you.
Welcome.
Michaela.
I find comparison really intense, and I often will, compare myself to someone else and then decide whether their advice is the right advice in relation to God, and I reject other people's advice based on how I've compared myself to them. And then I'll go into judgment, and I've just found that it's just made me feel so confused and so alone by like trying to compare to others and then to find help through these comparisons. And at the moment, I'm really trying to seek God's viewpoint on situations. But at the moment, I'm feeling really alone in that, because I don't trust myself, because I've been comparing myself my whole life and I've come up shit, so it's all a bit of a mess for me at the moment in terms of comparing to other people and wanting God's opinion.
Yeah, I hear you, Michaela.
Yeah.
Anything else? No. So, Virginia.
I think that seems to be a global thing, perhaps, that we compare ourselves.
Yeah.
I find myself a lot of times when I'm comparing myself, especially with success or when things are not happening for me, and thinking, well, like, why are they deserving of God's help? Rather than looking at my law of attraction and and cause and effect, and all the laws that are in place, and that I am drawing things to myself and not wanting to look at that. And I find that's when I do the most comparison.
Yeah, I think that's so true, Virginia. It's very easy to look at outside and not look inside at our own stuff, but also look at all the things that we've got to be grateful for, even though it seems limited. There's often things that we haven't even observed because we're so busy looking at other people's situations or whatever. Yeah, thank you. Mr. Bailey, Michael.
Hi, Alicia. I'm like Judith and many others. I use comparison to reinforce my feelings that I'm not as good as other people, or that other people have it easier or better or whatever. I use it to support reasons for feeling depressed, and I don't really, when I am judgmental and critical, I don't have a feeling, I don't have an appreciation for things that other people have done to, or for myself, to have actually gotten to the condition that we're in. You know, I don't go past the judgment. I think you're lucky or fortunate, but it takes work and desire and vulnerability and lots of character qualities, and I lose sight of that. And so this is reminding me that, I suppose, not to judge, but to think of our similarities, and I think it gives me more in common with other people, and compassion too.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't remember who said that, but we'd never know somebody else's story. So we can see somebody as being in a better place, but actually we've no idea how many steps they've taken to get there and what they've done to get them to arrive at that place. Lovely, thank you, Michael. So Lisa.
Yeah, this has been a huge issue for me. In fact, Robin Grisham, who I'm living with currently, didn't even really spend much energy talking to me for about 3 months of living here with her. And later, and before, she told me, it's because she felt like I was constantly competing with her, and it was constantly combating onto her, and me not even realizing the impact because it's been so big in me. And recently I had a really interesting experience where I just, I was able to get to some anger about my childhood experience towards my mom, and let myself feel like I want to win. I always lose. She always wins me. And just cried about that for 40 minutes. And then, like, within a few days, my aunt, who I talk to frequently, who's doing this work that we're doing, and Robin started talking to me. And my aunt said, wow, it's much easier to be around you. So, I mean, just from 40 minutes of beginning to feel some of it, I know there's a ton more in me, but it was very hopeful for me, like, to finally just grieve the child's experience of constantly being competed with. And then it's been my whole modus of operandi towards everybody, especially women, because I'm a woman, and I had that from my mom. So I'm feeling hopeful about this one, and I want to keep doing more, because I don't want to keep having that impact on all these people around me. And I want to have closer connections, and I want to honor my own uniqueness and see and appreciate others' uniquenesses. And so, yeah, I'm getting excited about it now.
Thank you, Lisa. That's very inspiring and faith building. Lovely. Would anyone else like to share? No, so I'll just share a teeny bit of me. I first of all considered how I haven't been brought up with any religion, as some others have, but I went from late teens, I went into the new agey, shamanic, divine stuff. And I can see how that led me away from God. And it took me a while, even listening to DT, to realize in a heart space that I can have a personal relationship with a personality rather than just some electric energy. So that was, so I can see that that affected me before, that I wasn't able to have that connection for sure. And so I didn't feel safe before. And so I'm saying that because I was comparing how it was, and then comparing with others who are still very much in that path, who I'm still, a few people I'm still in contact with, and I find quite difficult to relate to. And so there's a comparison thing going on there for me for sure. But yeah, as Virginia said, it's a global thing, countries and communities and families and within families, etc., comparing with each other. So and I think it was Virginia who said about that, having faith in, not just in the fact that it seems like such a big picture, but just recognizing all the small things. So for me, for example, Lisa asked me, I'm in Mexico. I don't really get why I'm here, but I'm here. And I don't have the means to go somewhere else. So rather than go, well, I want to go somewhere else, again, like, well, just stay here and look around and observe what there is to appreciate in where you are, because this is where you are. So don't try to move forward and wait, but step forward. It's almost like there's a subtle difference between waiting and stepping forward, like stepping forward in appreciating all the smaller things that you maybe hadn't noticed before. So I can see there's a subtle difference between being in doubt about a situation or what to do and waiting, as opposed to taking a step forward. The step forward might just be in your attitude. So there's a couple of things that came up for me. So let us move on to number 3. So Omra explains the scope and succession of our soul's free will within each stage of life. And this is in response to Aphraar's questioning God's design as possibly fatalistic. So this includes in page 84, paragraphs 1 to 4. So the first part, Omra explains the physical stage of infancy, a short part. So he says, what is the attitude of a parent towards a child who is not yet able to discern between the evil and the good? Is it one of arbitrary discipline or one of sympathetic tolerance, so long as the child respects the authority of yes and no? Here you have set before you the sphere of action, the scope, and the limitation of free will. So my question and observations were, what do you feel your parents' attitude to you was as a child in the throes of learning? And how has this, and does this, affect the way you use your free will now? And as you learn to live the way of divine truth, how do you feel God's attitude of free will, to free will, is helping you to grow? So would anybody like to share anything that came up for them? I met Michaela.
Got it. I'm finding that all the questions are a little bit overwhelming. So the last one about God and how his attitude to free will is helping me grow. I feel that it's really, like we've spoken about in earlier chapters, it's really like bringing me to the point where I really actually want to do this so that I can move forward God's way. And I can see now, and I'm just realizing in the last week how much I've been trying to do it all these other ways and convincing myself that I was doing it. And now, you know, it just keeps grinding me down to this point where I have to be really honest. And I wish it was different. I really, at the moment, I wish that God would just wave a wand and I would be better. But I appreciate now as well that then I would just go backwards. You know, my desire has to be really on point to be prepared to look at what I've done and how I've lived. So in that way, it sucks, but it's also really powerful. You know, I can see that if I can stick with where I'm at, I won't go backwards. But it's just about staying where I am and not running away.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thank you, Michaela. Judith.
Excuse me. Yeah, when I read this, I was thinking more about how angry my parents would get if we ever made a mistake or did something wrong. And, you know, I don't know if they ever explained anything like, oh, this is the reason why you don't do this. It was always, they would get very, very angry. So of course, I mean, not all the time, but most of the time. So of course, I feel like I have a lot of fear. And I, you know, anytime I make a mistake or get into a place where I feel like I'm not doing well, I do want to give up. And like Michaela said, it's really important to try and fuel that desire to just move on and be okay with a mistake. And that's kind of where I'm struggling right now. I don't have an answer as to what to do to forgive myself for my mistakes, or maybe just to feel from God what God thinks of the mistake, you know, so.
Yeah, thank you, Judith. And Lisa?
I found it really difficult growing up with a mom that would sometimes be angry suddenly and then be really nice and nurturing 2 hours later. And sometimes it was just the simplest thing, like the dish was slightly out of place, or, you know, something that she just didn't like, that she would launch her anger. So for me, it's like, I don't even really know when I was bad and when I wasn't. Like, that's what I'm trying to sort out now, is like, what's right and what's wrong. Like, when mom was angry as a kid, like every time mom was angry, I was bad. It was wrong. What I did was wrong. So I'm just trying to untangle that whole experience, and then asking God's truth in the process of God showing me, well, the way your mom behaved, even if you needed correction, was unloving, was wrong. You know, and like grieving that, oh, because I feel so deeply inside that I'm a bad girl. I'm bad. Yeah, so I'm just trying to really focus on getting God's truth on the matter. And it has hugely impacted my desire to take actions, independent actions in my life. And always kind of worried that, you know, even living here at Robbins and Tom's, that I'm going to do something wrong and get in trouble. And like, there's just a walking on eggshells kind of effect for me. So, yeah. I'm starting to learn God's view, which is, you know, a mistake in love can be corrected and will be, you know, will be penalized. But it's not in the way my mom punished me harshly. So I'm starting to trust that, but I'm really weak in the taking action department for sure. I think because of some of that walking on eggshells feeling in me.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, I can relate to, oh, Mila, sorry. Go for it.
I'm currently tantruming about how there were no rules, or if they were, finally turns out there were rules, and that the rules have been broken all along, and now I have penalties that I have to pay. So I'm currently really feeling the grief and anger, basically a tantrum, about how I'm being set up to lose, I've been set up to fail, and that circumstances create certain addictions that turns out to be pretty damaging. And now I'm the one who needs to go and pay the penalty about it. So I just can't win. No matter what, I'm the bad person. So I'm really, really angry about that right now, and I'm just gonna stay in that process till it's gone. Because that's how I get when I get into these places. I ain't doing nothing else till this feeling is gone. It's gonna be clear, because I think negotiating with it.
Oh, sorry. So there weren't rules. There weren't rules as far as your parents were concerned, or the environment you grew up in. But actually there were rules because God's got rules. That's what you mean. Okay, yeah. I guess that's for everybody, isn't it? Really, it's not that we're necessarily aware of it yet.
And I think that we all have to go through the tantrum at some point. We need to release it, and then there's room to feel God's feelings and compassion about it. Otherwise, I'm negotiating with the tantrum, but the tantrum is still in rebellion. So you just kind of rebelling. You still have the rebellion, and yet you're trying to talk your way out of it. So you're gonna keep shooting yourself in the foot, I feel, until you just surrender to the rebellion and just get it out.
Yeah. So I'm looking at that because in some parts of my childhood, I was pretty free and I could, wander on my own because it was a time when that was not so scary to do. At the same time, I could see the restrictions and limitations where I think Lisa said nothing was explained. Nothing was, even if you asked why, it was like, because I say so, rather than some logical explanation to understand it. So wouldn't it be wonderful if we'd actually been brought up with the rules of God in the first place? But obviously we weren't.
Maybe it could be something we could work through now. We could feel our grief and anger about the rules doesn't make sense. Why do it? Why does it have to be this way? And then ask God, but why does it have to be this way? Help me understand, because God will help us explain why the rules are the way they are, so that now we can have a teacher that does explain. The teacher doesn't say, because I say so. The teacher can explain the intelligence behind the rules. So we could engage that conversation. Once he does mentoring, I think that has to come out first.
Tantrums first of all. And yes, because I can remember and still have those feelings. They definitely still affect me to a certain extent of wanting to rebel or break the rules. I want to break the rules. I remember my mum saying rules were meant to be broken. So or there's like fitting in, or don't rock the boat, baby, going on. And but also the fear of whether you'll be approved of if you do that or not. Like you're approved sometimes, Lisa, and then sometimes you're not, so you're not sure which is the right thing to do. Yeah, very interesting. And there's something in me about the way when we do know, if we have it in our heart, we know some truth of God, even if it's just one thing, how solid that is and how freeing it is, even if it seems to others it's not. Like living a vegan lifestyle, for those of us who do, it's like, even if you're the only one in your environment who does, if you know that to be really true in you, it gives you a strength of being alone and there's a freedom in that somehow. Yeah. So would anybody else like to share anything? So I had a second part to this. Oh, Lisa, my dear.
Just to add to what you were just saying, Alicia.
Yeah,
there's a freedom in walking with God's way, because you're aligned in that, even if it's just one specific issue that some truth and it's in your soul, you're not getting all the negative consequences of having the laws beat against you. There's a strength because God's with you. There's a solidity, and you kind of feel that. You feel this knowingness, like this is right, and this feels good, and this feels loving. So it's a confidence builder too, just even if it's in one area of your life, like a simple thing like veganism or whatever area.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. So in the second little paragraph, I put Omra's continuing to speak. He said, the husbandman, and then it continues, having once planted the seed, he has renounced his free will and is bound to reap the harvest of what is sown. And he continues, when you throw off the flesh, you may enter upon a course of discipline demanded by the use you made of your free will. The discipline will be continued until all the dross, stain, contamination are purged away. All stubborn defiance broken down until the remorse gives birth to repentance, and the soul submits to and cries for mercy. Then, purified by affliction, it will submit to the Father's guidance and presently reach this hallowed spot and pass forward through the gate. I made a little note. What a gift it would be, or it is for us, through divine truth teachings, that we at least have a little awareness of what's happening in school in our next stage of life. So we can at least begin to start here. So I asked a couple of questions. How is purging the dross affecting your feelings about God, etc.? And how do you feel about God's laws of free will guiding you from remorse to eventually transform? Although I feel where it takes a while to get to remorse, even like to even recognize there's a sin and then confront it, and then maybe I'll get to remorse then. So anyone want to share anything? So one of the things that came up for me was it felt, I feel with all this purging, it feels like a trickle for me rather than a purging that's going on a lot of the time. I feel sometimes impatient and tired, even angry, and it feels like it's never ending. But at the same time, every time there's a little progress, it feels I have a little more eagerness to have overwhelming emotional showers, to shower off the mud. And when I lose faith, I keep reminding myself of that childlike wonder and awe, and remembering to open doors and close doors and keep opening doors, keep moving on. So it sort of goes for me from almost like swimming through mud to swimming through silk, then swimming through mud again, swimming through silk. But the way God's created it, it feels, with this free will, it feels like if I'm in a swimming pool, instead of just swimming all over the place, I'm staying in the lanes. I'm like going straight forward. As some of you know, I like imagery. So I like to invite Michaela to share with us.
In regards to the purging of the dross, I feel a little bit like Miller at the moment, in just the anger and the tantrum around having to do it and feeling confused about it. And I wish that there was more guidance. That's how I'm feeling at the moment. And the fact that you can get stuck supposedly purging the dross, but you're actually just in a tantrum or in some kind of self-deception. And so I'm just finding that aspect of it really frustrating at the moment.
Yeah. That's definitely true for me too. Thank you, Michaela. Anybody else like to share? No? Okay. Oh, Virginia, you would like to say something.
And when we talk about this, I was thinking about one of the talks that Jesus was doing, and he was saying that when you're in the spirit world, that it's like you have a list, of what you need to do, right? Yeah. What you're working on. And I so want that list. Because, God has already got my life all figured out. He knows exactly what I'm going to do. She knows when I'm going to change and make decisions and what I have to go through. And I just, like you were saying, I just so want that list. I would like clarity, a clear list of what I need to do myself. But then I think, well, this must be part of what I need to learn, is discovering that and being willing to experiment and work with it and having a desire to really find it.
Yeah, that's really clarifying, Virginia. So yeah, that we have a desire to uncover those truths within us rather than just have it laid out in front of us. Yeah. But I agree. I felt that too, that just tell me what I have to do. Yeah, thank you very much. Judith.
Yeah, Virginia, I totally am on the same boat, and I feel the same way. And I was thinking, there's a quote in this book, it's not in this chapter, but it's earlier, and it says that if we have a pure desire for something or for a prayer to be answered, and it's something that God can do, God cannot not answer it. And I think I was been thinking about that, and then I realized that I think that it has something to do with like our desire just isn't pure enough. There's something like with me, it's like, yeah, I want to do this, but no, you really just want to stop your pain. You don't want to stop all your other addictions that you do to, you know, truly follow God's way. And that's just where I am. So I just think that maybe we need to really kind of try and feel more where we're not lacking in desire and what we want instead, I guess. I don't know, it's hard to explain, but
Yeah, thank you very much, Judith. Mila.
I was just going to say, you could work through your emotions and why you don't want to know that list. Like, I don't want that list. I don't want to know. I'm sick and tired of feeling it's always me. I've missed something else. What have I done this time? I am tired of it. I'm just never enough. That's exactly the feelings I'm working through right now. And so when I'm in that feeling, I'm like, I don't want to know the list. Take your time. It'll take me a couple of 100 years to get there. I'm tired of you right now. We're not talking. Until I pray for somebody else, then we'll talk a little bit, but we're not talking right now. So, you know, make a list of, I don't want to know the list and why. And then those feelings starts to come out, and, you know, those are your honest feelings and genuine grief. So it's okay. Instead of saying, well, there is a list, and if only I was sincere enough, I'll be able to see the list, and, oh, well, I guess I'm not sincere. Once you connect to the feeling, you'll be like, oh yeah, no, I really mean this feeling. I really am feeling this way. I really am angry. And, you know, you get to be honest, and it helps. So yeah, no, I don't want to see no list right now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mila. Lisa, you had your hand up, but now you don't. So I just wanted to check if you wanted to say something.
Wanted to clarify that I had sort of missed the two questions. I was holding the first one in the mind and then didn't really fully get the second one. That's why I had chatted it to everybody. So I hope that wasn't a distraction, but Mila had questioned me about that. So I just thought I'd say that. And I don't have to do that anymore if that doesn't help people.
No, but thank you. And as Michaela said, they are overwhelming. So thank you, Michaela, for saying that. I get that. So if no one else wants to share anything, or you do, let me know. Otherwise, we'll move on. What way? Just a second. I've lost myself. Ah, yes. Omra continues to say, every soul shall feed upon the essence of that it furnishes to another. If you will think that over, you will see how that ensures that we give you of our best, and also how every inquiry you make affords us the opportunity of attaining to something better. So for me, that brought up, it's in giving that we receive. And I just mentioned it. In what ways do you feel it's possible for you to give of yourself in your present condition? And how do you feel when you are able to give freely without any expectation? So anyone like to share anything about that? Ms. Lou, Michaela?
I've just been able to find recently in myself that I can give to children, certain children in specific settings. But and just recently as well, like I kind of, since I had kids, I felt this complete resistance to children, but I feel like I'm finding it again. And it's in that moment that I'm able to really give, and it just makes me want to cry. And I can feel that what I'm receiving from them is just seeing that purity and seeing and understanding how to be gentle in love and seeing how it's received. And it just makes me want to cry. It's been really beautiful to reconnect to that part of myself.
Yeah. And that's with your kids and with other kids.
Not my kids, other kids, which is a part of the crying at the moment. But I'm finding that as I'm being able to meet other children in that way, it's sort of trickling backwards in being able to bring it more into my life all the time. But it's a very gentle, delicate process at the moment of trying to be soft and loving and open-hearted.
Yeah, it's almost like I find it sometimes easy to be more giving to people who I don't have an emotional connection with.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I get that. Judith.
Yeah, to kind of bounce off of what Michaela said, I feel like just in general, I mean, kids are not, regardless of what I feel my condition is, just tell people the truth. When so often I don't want to tell people the truth, or I don't want to speak up, I don't want people to be mad at me. So I never really speak the truth. And I'm really trying to tell myself, really think about it. And anytime you hear something you don't agree with, just speak up, And the other thing is with kids, I just feel like ask them their feelings, We always tell them, oh, well, you should do this and that and the other, but just try and ask them what they're feeling. Because I'm working with a foster child right now, so that's fun. That's been coming up for me. So that's the one thing that came to me from this. So,
thank you, Judith. Is there anyone else who'd like to share anything? So a couple of things that came up for me were, I can see it in layers, for example. I've been working by donation for the last 8 years, and it's like, will I make the next month's rent often? But I can see how there's layers of still being able to give to others and not have an expectation. In the beginning, for sure, I hoped that someone would give, and then it became less and less. But I still have little inklings of that with those people. And I hear that with Michaela and Judith saying about children. And I find that with animals too, because I feel like I'm getting a more honest response from them, but I can also see there's maybe an avoidance of wanting to have a response that I don't want to. It seems easier to give to children or to animals. And but I can see how even if we seemingly give very freely, there can be a little nuance of desiring some form of approval or wanting to feel like we're a good person, or, aren't I, look at me, even for ourselves, even if we do something that nobody else has any clue about, there's still a bit of it. It can be like, oh yeah, I feel good about myself. Or at least God's watching me, or something like that. Yeah. So no one else has anything want to share? Okay, thank you. So finally, number 5. This does look overwhelming, even to me, just looking at it, Michaela. So this is basically about God's design. And Omra, of course, goes into this whole meditative, illuminating thing about it. But in the beginning, he says, the great architect of the universe has called you into being and brought you so far on your way because he has a particular spot in his edifice which you and only you can fill. That being so, there is no reason for you to fear as to your being able to reach it. God will have all men be saved. Rebellion may delay, but it cannot frustrate the Almighty's plan. So what are your feelings about God's plan and saving you, which I remember Mila brought up in the last chapter, and your unique spot in that plan? And this came to me as well as, is this just for people who are on the path with God, on the divine love path, or is there like a separate edifice for those on the natural love path. I also was curious about that. So anybody want to share anything? Judith?
Well, when I read this, and I don't know if anyone else has any input, but I thought that Jesus had said that there's going to come a time when God is not going to help you. Like the heavens are going to close.
Yeah.
And so that just made me think of that. So I don't know which one is true, but I would assume God would always be there. This paragraph makes it sound like no matter how far we rebel or how bad we get, eventually God is going to get us. And
Yeah.
I just didn't know if that was true or not. That was my issue. So.
Yeah, thank you,
Yeah.
Judith. Lisa?
Oh, that's interesting, Judith, because I hadn't heard it that God wasn't going to help us anymore. I heard Jesus say that God's love would no longer be on offer as a gift for us to receive. But I see that all of God's loving laws are in place to, once people have made a choice whether they're going to have a relationship with God or not, then God is drawing every single individual into a place of perfect happiness or immense divine love bliss. So I feel like God is always going to be helping us. We're in God's belly, in the universe is God's belly. So I didn't hear it as God not helping us ever. So.
Well, I guess God's laws will always be there to guide us and to create all the things that they do now. So, yeah.
Which, I mean, in a sense is like God's laws are part of God's personality, which is the essence of God, which is always still there with us. But some people have made a choice that they don't want to have that personal relationship. And so the gift eventually would be offered again, likely when some more people have that desire, who are, of the divided camp that are in the natural love edifice, if there is such a one. So.
All right, I paused the recording briefly just now, just so we could have a conversation that was respectful, and now we'll continue. Okay.
Thank you, Lila. So the other question I had with this little piece was about how does Aphraar feel about his unique spot? How is he feeling about that? That he has a specific unique spot? Michael?
Could I respond to the question before this?
Uh-huh.
Okay. I don't know how God, okay. I don't know the circuitous path I'm taking to wherever it is I'm going. I don't know how God can anticipate that and say that there's only one place, only one person that can fulfill this, and that's me. It's just beyond my understanding. I figured that God, we all have a piece of God's personality, and we're all going to be together at one with God and our soulmate someday. And that's as close to a specific as I can. So I don't understand what Aphraar is saying, or what Omra is saying here. And there was a question too about what about people with natural love. In the example of the living temple, he talks about the people that form the choir, and I suppose the people that furnish and garnish the temple, maybe those people. But then he talks about only like the super elect being part of the living temple. And so I'm thinking, well, that's probably not going to be me, even if I have divine love and I'm transformed. Those are like the real high flyers. So his imagery is confusing to me. That's what I wanted to throw in.
Yeah, and maybe that's why Aphraar feels it earlier, and he says about it isn't that fatalistic, because it's almost like predestined. But of course, it all depends on which path you take, and it depends on how far you move and what your deeds actually are, etc. So yeah, I'm also confused about this little piece for sure. So maybe Michaela, do you have something you want to share? Or Michael, you didn't put your hand still up, but that's
Just, I could see it in Aphraar's case because he's got this mission to perform that only he can do, which is to that woman that he had the relationship with.
Yeah.
And so I can see his specialness there, but as I can see it in his example, but not in mine.
yeah. Thank you.
Like,
Michaela.
can I suggest, Michael, that those questions are able to help you connect to feelings of low self-worth? It's an opportunity to let those feelings be triggered.
Good idea. Michaela?
I found with this section about this concept of being unique, I find that I'm really becoming aware that my whole life has been about wanting to fit in and wanting to find somebody else approving of what I'm doing, so thus agreeing with them. So I feel like I just have these very small moments at the moment where I can appreciate my uniqueness, and in those moments there is this sense of excitement and also this sense of peace. Like I don't actually need everybody else to approve of me before I can go forward and be this. But I'm finding I'm really having to break down that desire for attention and validation and approval from everyone else before I can really even sit in this concept of I'm unique, and that's actually how I was created to be, and that's the only way that I'm actually going to get into goal.
Yeah, and almost as if there's a dichotomy with being different and uniqueness. Like others can look at you as being different because you're not fitting in, but it's more about, no, I'm actually unique. There's only me. There's a difference in there. But I can feel that feeling different and not fitting in and rebelling against fitting in that's gone on a lot of the time. But the uniqueness has more of an aspiration to it somehow. Yeah, Mila. Thank you, Michaela.
So when I'm feeling about my comparison addiction, which is very strong, I found that the antidote to comparison is uniqueness. When you are unique, the need for comparison is redundant. Like it started to slowly soften my addiction for comparison, because how do you compare in uniqueness? Like God has created a beautiful solution. We're temporarily talking right now. I'm just going to compliment God this one time, then I'll go back to being mad. But it's a pretty good solution that there's no need for comparison. Like it just takes it away. The competition and comparison is redundant when you're unique. Like there's just no need for any of that. So it's kind of like a built-in system to not even have the kids to even ever compare or compete with each other. Like there's just no point, because if you're trying to be somebody else, then your spot is vacant and we're all waiting for you to come and claim your spot. And the part about uniqueness also makes me kind of like, even in my tantrum, I'm having like this resigned faith that, you know what, there is a unique path. God has a plan. And somewhere along the way, I think I'm already on the path, and that all the things that needs to happen along the way are already going to be pre-designed. And when I'm helping people, it also makes me feel like, you know, I don't need to know the plan. But here and now, God has decided that there's something in this interaction that can help us both. We just have to do our bit in that moment. And that somehow the bigger plan is a plan I don't have to come up with a treatment plan for everyone, for everything. There's already a bigger plan in place for each of us.
And that really shows throughout these books that there's a plan for everything, even if you don't know what the next step is. You're propelled along by your desire and your questions and your curiosity. Yeah, absolutely. And that uniqueness in being able to not only see it in yourself, but realize that there is no comparison, because, well, everybody else is unique too. So there isn't any comparison or competitive, because they have their own unique path, and it couldn't possibly be yours. It may be similar, but not yours. Yeah, thank you, Mila. And finally, 4 minutes to go. In Omra's expansive description of God's magnificent church, what feelings and qualities does it inspire in you? And do you feel worthy to become a part of such glory? Does God feel you worthy? So would anybody like to say anything about this? Now, final run. Lisa.
So I feel moments where I really do feel from God my worthiness and my uniqueness, and that I will be there. And meanwhile, there's a whole big bucket full of low self-worth. So it's both. It's a little bit of both.
Yeah, thank you. I can relate to that. Anybody else like to share anything? Yep. Well, I just came up with, it gives me faith to step away from the fray and stand more in God's truth, as far as I know it, which is only a minuscule amount at the moment, and encourages me to act on aspirations and motivations, even when I feel it's just me and there's no one else going to join me. It's just me. Even if it's just me doing it at home on my own, that's fine. But so there's inspiration in this for me. And definitely, as you said, Lisa, I definitely don't feel worthy. But even just reading what's going on with Aphraar, I can feel God's feeling of worthiness towards me. But I wish I could feel more of that, of how God feels about me. At the moment, it's only a very small amount. So more humility needed. So anyone else? Last minute? No? Going? Okay, well, I'd like to say thank you to everybody for your patience and your understanding and your perspectives. And I look forward to seeing you next week.